Racism to me is the unfair treatment, bias, thought process, infrastructure that unfairly redistributes, I'll say, resources and benefits others as far as one race over another. So it's not just, in my opinion, oh, you treat someone unfair because they're of a different race. It's a thought process. It's more than a mindset. It's a thought process that in some instances is very systemic in the infrastructures and various infrastructures here, not in just the United States, but all over the world. It would be nice if we lived in a world without racism. I don't think that that will ever happen because I think it is just too embedded. The hierarchy of, I don't want to say crabs in a bucket, that's not my correlation I want to say, but the need for someone to always kind of outdo and to better someone else is huge, not just in this country, but in this world. It's very problematic. I think that unfair treatment of other folks exists, yes. I believe that there are various forms of oppression. I don't believe in reverse racism because, in my opinion, that's the same adage that a lot of other scholars feel, that there has to be a majority and a minority in order for a racism to exist. I think that, do we have biases? Yes. Are they racial biases? Yes. That is not racism. Racism is something that is a structural thing. It's very much embedded in the systems, in the infrastructure of a country, of a global society in essence. And because you always have one that's in a more dominant position than the other, there's no such thing as reverse racism. Not based on my description. They need to be aware of it because if not, then society teaches us that we're conditioned to it. So I was reading, research that I have been doing recently involves environmental racism from the standpoint of not just the physical environment around us, like the land or the air that we breathe or things like that, but environmental from the standpoint of education. Embedded within the public school education system, the scholar that I've been looking into is Dr. Karen Cox, who's a professor in the university, in UNC Charlotte, University of North Carolina, Charlotte. And she wrote a book a few years ago called Dixie's Daughters, which is about the United Daughters of the Confederacy. And within that book, she talks about how this group of women who were antebellum Southern belles, let's call them that, these white women happened to be descendants, direct relatives, descendants, legacy folks of soldiers who participated in the Civil War on the Confederate side. And so these were women who came together and decided, we're not going to let someone else tell our Civil War story. We're going to tell our own Civil War story. And so as a result, what they did was make sure that they created a system which embraced not only just slavery, seeing it as a benevolent institution, but they also changed the narrative in the textbooks that are in our public education. And so those textbooks look at slavery as a benevolent institution. Well, there were happy black people. There were happy slaves. They weren't unhappy. They weren't ill-treated. They were all treated well. The slave owners they took care of them. It was very much like a family. It was a paternal relationship. These men treated these female slaves well. And so what they did was take that narrative which they believed in, and instead of seeing the Civil War as based on slavery, they said, no, it was based on states' rights. And so that narrative has now been embedded within the textbooks that exist within the public education system when it comes to referring to that particular time period. That right there tells you how dangerous that racism is and how much it can be embedded in any type of structure in this country. I believe that knowledge is one way to combat racism. I believe that dialogue is another way to combat racism. I believe direct confrontation with racist individuals is another way to combat racism. But to do so from a way that it is not seen as antagonistic. Because if that's going to be the case, nothing's going to change. You're going to walk away the exact same. Someone else is going to walk away up in their feelings and there's no resolution to that. I think, as Ava DuVernay says, not reformation, but in essence, reconstruction is what's going to be required. I think, honestly, I think it's going to come from the people, and then the people they're in a position to make some very grassroots changes, and from there it expands out, if that makes any sense.
Okay.
I think that it can be combated. I just don't think that in my lifetime, it's not going to.